Alright, hello and welcome. My name is Jason Welsh, and today we're going to be investigating how to make a 3D printed part and putting copper on the surface of it. Okay, so here is a copper electroformed part. It's just out of my scrap bin. It's 100% copper. You can solder to it. You can do all kinds of crazy things. You could electroplate silver to it. So we have our 3D printed Hand of the King, and we're going to make this into a copper Hand of the King. So step by step, should be pretty fun. Right now I'm just waiting for it to cool down so I can get the part off the bed, but I'll show you what we do in the next step, so hold on. Alright, so we first start out with our 3D printed part. We need a few things. So this is your grocery list. You will need graphite powder. You can get this at, well, you're going to have to get it online. You might be able to get it at Hobby Lobby, but it's kind of rare in your stores. So get it online. It's worth it, and it lasts you a very long time. So you might as well just get some. You're going to need acetone, you're going to need a small little mason jar, doesn't matter much, an acid brush, and you can see that this has got this goo in it, so we constantly have to add acetone to the goo because the acetone will evaporate out. There's no keeping the goo at a status where you're never going to add acetone to it. You're always going to have to add it. So no matter what kind of sealed container you leave this in, it's always going to evaporate out. It's weird, but it happens. And yep, let's see, acid brush, and that's it. So that's your grocery list. And I know I'm going to forget something, but as we go through the video and how to do this, I will add more. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, we'll start by mixing the graphite powder with acetone to a consistency that I will show. It's one of these things, it's kind of a feel for type of thing, so it's no exact measurement. I'm going to add a lot of acetone to it. Stir it around, get all the stuff off the edge. You can mix this stuff pretty thin as long as it's well mixed. And actually, the thinner you get it, you can see it, how it's like, I'm going to try to show it at an angle here. There's no bumps. Okay? It doesn't drip off the brush yet, but it's about to. That's a good consistency. Having another jar here might help because you're going to end up putting this like this so it dries. Wear gloves. You don't want graphite on you. It takes, especially graphite melded with ABS plastic. It's not that it's toxic, it just takes a really long time to get off your skin. So we're going to coat this part with this mixture, and we're going to try to keep it so it doesn't have a whole lot of gloppiness to it. In other words, you want this stuff to dry. Gloves. Let's describe gloves. Acetone eats final gloves, so I'm trying not to touch this as much because I do not have nitrile gloves at my disposal right now. There we go. So I coated the one side, and then I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll coat the other side. Alright, so after both sides are coated with your graphite, make sure you didn't miss any. Like, see these little things? I just want to make sure that you know that you can reapply this in areas just generally, lightly. Don't want to get it too much because acetone will eat your part. But you do want to make sure that everything is covered with this substance. Good. Okay, good. Now let it dry very well. I would say 15 to 20 minutes. And then we're going to go on to the next process. Alright, so our next step, we're going to be using some very fine steel wool. Finest you can find. And we are going to be getting rid of all the bumps. And only leaving the graphite that is stuck to the 3D part. And this is where you kind of recoup all your details again. So essentially you want this thing to shine like it looks like it's made out of like I don't know, wrought iron maybe, or a steel, matte steel. Which is kind of a cool method right now that I'm showing you to make falk steel. You can clear coat this if you wanted to. You wouldn't have to have it copper. I just realized I took my gloves off to go do other things, so now my hands are completely black. Awesome. You're getting all that detail back in there. Now, another thing is when you 3D print it, you could go in and take a Dremel and lightly inscribe it in areas that you wanted the detail to be, because the higher the contrast, the better, because the acetone is going to knock it down a little bit anyway. So if you're going to do this, you should have some high contrast parts. Large changes between heights. Cool. Don't breathe the graphite dust, very bad for you. So there we go. So now we build a carriage for it. Alright, so now you need some copper wire. It could be 18 gauge, it can be any gauge really, but it has to be uncoated, so make sure that you have uncoated copper wire. You can get it at the hardware store. It's best to get it at the hardware store because they only sell the uncoated copper wire. But if you get it at the craft store, you're bound to get jewelry wire, which is not good. Okay, so we make one of these. This is kind of a cradle, I guess I could call it. And you fold that in half. So it's got a lot of tension. You insert your 3D printed part into it. So this must dangle. You might want to choose an area or a large enough cradle. In this case I made too small of a cradle, I think. Maybe not. Yeah, I can attach it to the back side. But you want this to make really good contact with your part. So squish it on there. Make sure it's got a pretty good amount of pressure going up against your part. Cool. Then next, you make a Christmas tree hook. Okay, and that goes on the back side, so it dangles, just like that. And now the thing is, plastic floats. So I got this rock, and I need a small hook at the end of it. So I just attach some copper wire to a rock. And I don't want this touching the bottom of the tank, so what I do is I form it into a small enough hook, and then that hook goes onto the bottom. So the whole thing kind of looks like this. Cool. So now that we have our carriage, and I'm just calling it a carriage, I have no idea what this apparatus would be called, but there we go. We're going to go dip it into my electroforming tank. Okay, so just in case you wanted to build one of these yourself, here's the basic rundown. We have a Rubbermaid container, and it's got a hole drilled into it where I can slide a piece of 6-gauge copper. Notice that it's very clean, and you're going to have to clean this off all the time. So I use steel wool to clean that off. When you clean it, please make sure to stay away from the tank when you clean it. In other words, off to the side, not over the tank. You do not want steel wool in your tank. Nice. So, steel wool. Okay. Next, so we have copper on both sides of this, and let me see if I can adjust the camera here, and you can see that there's a wire that runs from the copper anode over to the other. So these are anodes, and the thing that we're going to dangle in here is your cathode. This copper can be any copper. I like using pipe. I've used a ton of different types of copper. So in this case I have this thick thing that I got at a scrap metal place, and it's lasted a long time. But the problem is, I notice with the thicker copper I don't see the shininess. So I like using tubes now. And I like using tubes that are really tall, because by the time it eats down, so I'll start up right about here, and then by the time it keeps eating away at this, it goes down, down, down. Finally it gets down to the point where it's right about here. And you don't want your these to go too far into your bath, because they start growing crystals. You can start seeing the crystals grow here. Another thing is you got to be wary of is the holes on this side and this side will start growing crystals around it and then go into your bath. That will short circuit it, so it's not going around as far as the circuit is concerned. So make sure you clean off any crystals around these holes, and make sure the crystals don't go into the bath. So you want a good circuit going all the way around. So in this case I have my positive wire from my DC power supply. Okay. And I start out really low. I'll start out like, I'll turn this all the way down. Hook your positive lead to this, your anode, and then I'll slide in my bar. And attach my negative lead. So notice that my negative and positive are far enough away from the liquid so they don't start corroding and growing crystals. Trust me, keep this stuff away from kids. Put it in an area. It's not that it's toxic, it's just little kids, not like high schoolers, but little kids. The area starts growing crystals. Definitely not good for you. at all. As far as you know, they get it on your hands, so you don't want to eat. Copper sulfate is also a root killer, so you just constantly wash your hands. Be thorough with the idea that this stuff is not good for you as far as digestion is concerned. Now, if it gets on your hands, it's no big deal, but it does have a slight amount of sulfuric acid inside the blue. So I gave you a formula in another video, if you look for my channel, on how to produce the liquid. So just make sure it doesn't get on your hands too much. It will dry out your hands like a mad dog. It does sting if you have a cut, but other than that, I've noticed nothing really too much, and I've been doing this for quite some time. So, alright, here we go. Now I want this to dangle into this liquid, so it's this way. See? This way. And I don't want that rock to touch the bottom. And I can already feel that it's touching the bottom. So, I gotta shorten up my hook or shorten up my rock. And I will shorten up both. I don't really believe in editing videos because I like showing the problem solving methods. And sure enough, I'm just looking down into the liquid and I see that it's not touching the bottom. Good. So I'm going to crank up the power a little bit. I'm just going to make sure that it's not touching, like the anode and cathode cannot touch. So I'm going to turn up the juice a little bit, and sure enough, I'm getting feedback on this side. Okay, now we got to very carefully turn this up because we want it only to be around 0.9 on this side for right now, because if you get it too high, what will happen is all the graphite will cook. It's too much electricity, too much current for the graphite to take, so we want a little bit of a copper to build up onto the surface before we start cranking this up. 0.7, 0.8, somewhere around there, until it starts growing enough copper onto the surface, and then it can handle the amperage after that. Alright, so this is going to take like probably about 45 minutes before I can crank up the amperage. So for right now, I go get something to eat, wash my hands. Yes. Alright, see you in 45. Alright, so it's been about 45 minutes and I want to check my piece. I noticed on the amp meter it went from 0.9 to 1.20. So that tells me that there's a significant amount of copper that has been deposited on the piece without even looking at it. Now that it's gone up this high, I am going to crank this up to about 1.8. And let's look at the piece here. Copper hand of the king. Okay. So now with that amp meter cranked up, we're going to let that piece sit in there for about 30 more minutes. Now you see that light right there? So that's telling me that there's a short circuit between the anode and cathode, so you got to be very careful of that. Alright, so come back in 30 minutes and we'll see how our hand of the king is doing. Alright, 30 minutes has gone by, let's check it out. Ooh, I'm going to call that good for demonstration purposes only. Nice. So I'm gonna rinse this off. I got gloves on this time because I didn't want to get a bunch of copper sulfate on my hands. Release this clamp. You'll see that underneath it is copper. Maybe missed a little tiny spot right there, and a little tiny spot right there, but other than that, it looks really good. Oh, looks stuff in the corner. So that's all the stuff you have to kind of pay attention to. A lot of that might be the fact that I didn't, you know, like I was using steel wool on it. Maybe I didn't get that place right there. So I'm going to go rinse this off and I'll show you how to finish it off. Alright, so I have the hand of the king here. Put it on a paper plate to keep it nice and clean. Change my gloves. A lot of the stuff you use for patinas on metal is, it just makes your hands so dry. And you'll see that in some of my videos where I don't wear gloves and hands get so freaking dry. So if you're going to go through this process and you're going to use the chemicals that I'm going to be listing, I would definitely wear gloves. This is ultra fine steel wool. Same stuff I used to buff it the first time when I was doing the graphite. You can see it's getting quite shiny. There is a pretty substantial layer of copper on here, but not a lot. I mean, usually if I really wanted that, I'd let it go for about 2 to 3 hours. And I've had it go up to 6 hours before I ended up with this very heavy hand of the king. I'd stay away from using rotary tools, rotary buffers. All that stuff causes heat, and underneath, remember, there's plastic. Just been down a few roads. I'm just giving you some fair warning on some things that aren't that compatible with plastic, ABS, and copper. You could do buffing wheels, but the compound's a pain in the butt to get off of it. I wouldn't get this too much wet either until you get it all sealed. Never dip your 3D printed part in baking soda. What'll happen is the baking soda will get underneath the newly formed copper. Somehow it will find a way, and then it's a hot mess. So don't do that. I'm going to call that good, even though I would spend a little bit more time. I want kind of an aged look to it. Good. Okay, let's talk about finishings. All kinds of crazy. Some of my favorites. Perma blue. This is great. This is for gun bluing. This will give it a kind of a dark patches in all the cracks and crevices that you can then sand out. That's good. Here's another one, brass black. This will turn the copper almost 100% black, which is kind of a neat effect. Liver of sulfur. Okay. dilute this down or it'll turn it black. If you want it kind of reddish, that's a good product. And then I have some patina that I have made myself out of fertilizer. Oh wait, yeah. Oh no, sulfur and acid. I covered this in one of my earlier videos on electroforming rings. This stuff is highly concentrated, so if you were to use that and you were to watch that video, I would tell you to thin the liquid out. Let me look around for some water. Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to add some of this to some water. Just a few drops will do it. Have some nice clean paper towel ready at your disposal, because you can wipe this stuff off quickly that way. And we'll just coat it on. I hate waiting for patina. That's why I like this patina. It's fast acting. One of the videos I call it rainbow patina, but at a diluted rate it doesn't give you the rainbow effect. It gives you kind of an orangish red. So you can think about this being the highest concentrate will give you almost black, and then variations of the dilution will give you all the way down to a yellow. So I'll start by doing that, and then in a higher concentrated form, I'll do like areas that are with the jewelry, and hurry up and brush it on and take it off. Nice. Kind of see all the different colors there. Tons of colors. Okay, then you take steel wool and you polish it out again. And this will leave all the cracks and crevices that new color. Won't touch the back. And you can keep doing that until your heart's desired. The more you do it, the more detailed you'll get, the more depth you'll get. There we go, the hand of the king. 3D print. I clear coat this with an enamel. It can be any enamel. I like glossy enamel. If it's a ring or something else, if you're following this process and you're making jewelry that goes up against the skin, don't use enamel. Use this. This is good for contact with skin. Protect-A-Clear. Great product. So I hope you enjoyed making the hand of the king. Have a good one.